We are nearing the end of day two, the 2018 US Open. And we've had some tremendous tennis on display today, folks. Tremendous. And of course, these players have had to rise to such a challenge with this sweltering heat. Good God, Lord have mercy on these players. Well, suppose they had a little mercy on the players playing right now, namely Roger Federer, whom I'm watching, who is dressed in it's a dark reddish. Name of this color is escaping me. A purplish reddish. It's an interesting outfit he has. How's everybody doing? I want to wait for this stream to kind of find its own rhythm. It takes a little time for these streams to kind of tune into my face, and then I can cut out the beginning a little later on. But sometimes it takes a little while for the audio to get synced. But we have some great stories, some great and exciting news coming from the US Open. I have a feeling a lot of you are probably watching the Federer match. And that's why potentially you're not on YouTube. Well, come hither. Come now. Let's watch together. You can turn me on gently in the background and watch the great maestro do a very impressive job on the poor Japanese Nishioka. Well, Federer has taken the first set very decisively and is now up very decisively. In the second set, doesn't appear to be a big problem for Federer in the first round. For that reason, I think it's not inappropriate to have this live stream. We love to watch Federer. He's like a work of art. On the other hand, there are not incredible consequences to this match. Let me re-articulate that. It's not incredible competition. There is incredible consequences, of course, but, well, the consequence is, will Federer go on to face, I believe it will be Benoit Paire, whom he last faced at Halle. But let me tell you, that Djokovic today once again proved that he is the hyena. He proved that he is the hyena, didn't he? It's never a pretty path for Novak Djokovic, ever. He's not worried about beauty. He's not worried about the process being pretty. He's worried about lifting the trophy, and he does what he needs to do to lift the trophy. But what I want to talk about a little bit today is what I'm calling the Djokovic paradox. Djokovic has this ability. Well, ability is not quite the right way to say it. It is an ability, but what the paradox consists of is this with Djokovic, and it was evidenced very clearly in his match with Marton Fucsovics today, who was playing very impressively. And Fucsovics is a top drawer player, folks. He may have some titles in his future, in fact. But the Djokovic paradox is this, and the final score of this match, for those of you who don't know, is Novak Djokovic does come through, escapes the clutch of Fucsovics, 6-3, 3-6, meaning he dropped the second set, then 6-4, and then took the Hungarian to the bagel shop 6-0 in the final set. Well, this was one of quite a few bagels that were being produced today at the US Open. This heat is creating stresses. A lot of retirements happening today. I'm coming back to Djokovic, don't worry. And we've got Federer on as well. He's about to take the second set. He now has a set point on Nishioka's serve. I believe this will be the third time he's broken Nishioka in the match. We were looking for this ability in Federer. We were looking for this dimension of Federer's game, the return game. Well, Nishioka's not the stiffest competition, folks, so we can't read too much into it. But I have been thoroughly enjoying watching the great Roger Federer in this odd and somewhat, I believe, unprecedented dark red / purple outfit he has. I think a white outfit would be better for purposes of beating the heat. But let me say, Novak Djokovic, if anyone knows that it was hotter than Georgia asphalt at the U.S. Open today, Novak Djokovic knows. And he was suffering. But he was able to pull through like he has so many times. And like he demonstrated in Cincinnati. Remember, he dropped the set in every match, virtually every match of Cincinnati. I think in the first round, it was a straight set. And then, of course, Federer didn't require too much. Nishioka may just squeeze out a hold here in the Federer match. But again, Federer's up 5-1 in the second set, having taken the first. He looks committed. He looks focused. He looks stolid. He does not look emotional. Why would he be? This is a pretty clean job for him tonight. Doesn't even appear to be breaking much of a sweat there in the New York sweltering heat. Well, but Djokovic had his work cut out for him because Fucsovics was applying the pressure to Novak Djokovic, my friends. And what does Djokovic do with the pressure? Well, sometimes he can't deal with it. Sometimes the paradigm of defense, sometimes Djokovic, the defensive machine, is not enough to counter the force, the blitzkrieg of Marton Fucsovics today. Well, Djokovic bided his time. But he was able to turn this thing around in the third set. Down a break in the third set, it looked like Fucsovics would take the second set. It looked like Djokovic was going to have to go to 5 sets in the first round in order to win this thing. But Djokovic, so true to character, dug down deep and was patient, waited for the opportunities, and then began his march to the finish line and to the second round, where he will face Tennys Sandgren, by the way. I think he has a winning record against Tennys Sandgren. As I recall, they faced each other in the Australian Open. I'll have to go back and check that. But Djokovic turned it around. And here is the Djokovic paradox that I would like to express. Yes, Liam, I think he is being creative. We're going back to Federer. Federer seems to be feeling imaginative, feeling daring. He seems to be playing fantastic tennis out there, folks. But again, for you Fed fans, this is not cause to get your hopes up too high, because Nishioka is not the stiffest competition, folks. I said that earlier. Of course, that's clear. You guys know this, but it's nice to see Federer in smoother, cleaner form, coming through this match cleanly. Remember last year? Do you remember last year in the first round of the U.S. Open? I'm sure a few of you do. It was Tiafo, and I want to talk about Tiafo. He came through Mannarino today, and I watched quite a bit of this match between Tiafo and Mannarino. Tiafo does escape, which is not quite the right way to say it, because he dominated He did drop a set, however. The final score was 6-1, 6-4, 4-6, 6-4. So it was a fight there at the end. He had to struggle. Again, he had to dig down deep, but I want to talk about Tiafo. Back to Djokovic, though, for one moment. The Djokovic paradox, as I'm kind of thinking about it and trying to articulate it right now, is that Djokovic must taste loss. He must see loss coming down the tracks. He must see it and taste it before he can really start revving up the engines, before the Serb, the savage Serb, can kick it into high gear. Now, remember, Roger Federer did not require that Novak Djokovic. In Cincinnati, I'm saying, Roger Federer did not require that Novak Djokovic kick it into high gear. Therefore, Djokovic stuck with an approach of basically pushing and going deep. It's about the easiest way to explain that strategy, and it worked against a foundering Roger Federer last Sunday. Well, that was not working against Marton Fucsovics. Federer actually has a pretty good record against Fucsovics, but Fucsovics has given even Roger Federer some problems. There was the match at the Australian Open that they had. Of course, Federer came through that without much incident, but Fucsovics is no slouch, folks. He has an attacking game that can get under Djokovic's skin, particularly if Djokovic is not in the state of sort of revving himself up. Listen, he thrives on adversity. Everyone knows that. And everyone has talked about that. Thanks, Patrick. Per has just taken Novak there in 4 sets, apparently. It was a very, very competitive match there at the end. Per escaped in a tiebreak in the 4th set. Yes, they're getting heat stroke. They're dropping like flies, these players, folks. There were so many retirements today. Now, some of them were combination of injuries, but you can tell the heat was playing a role. The bagels were flying too, which suggests just unusual kind of play, unusual activity, unusual states that the players are in, basically, brought on by this devastating heat. There were at least 4 or 5 retirements. Let's go. So the Djokovic paradox, and this is kind of the nugget for the day, just to kind of stew on. Put this in your pipe and smoke it. The Djokovic paradox is that he must taste loss in order to truly come out in full throttle. That's what must happen, and Djokovic does it. Well, it's not a pretty process for Djokovic. It's ugly. It is very nearly always ugly. It's not a pretty process, and sets are dropped. But that's the paradox. As I'm developing it here over the course of the past couple of weeks, this is sort of empirical evidence. This is the post-injury Djokovic. The paradox is he must feel a loss coming on in order to win. That's it. Now, let's contrast with that with Roger Federer. I've said before that Roger Federer must lose in order to win. And I think that's coming to fruition right now because, of course, he lost pretty badly to Novak Djokovic in Cincinnati, but he's going to come back and win. He's going to do some winning for us this week and next, folks. Fed fans, be happy. I think you can look forward to a lot of great tennis from Federer, even if it ultimately stops, it halts in the quarterfinals. Even if Djokovic is able to possibly turn around a competitive match. You see, the match with Federer and Djokovic in Cincinnati wasn't representative because if Federer had been playing better, he might have permitted Djokovic, he might have forced Djokovic, to taste loss. But that's a scary prospect, isn't it? When Djokovic tastes loss, and this is the Djokovic paradox, when he tastes loss, he wins. And he did that today against Marton Fucsovics. There was a bagel in the final set. Fucsovics collapsed. But the match was won in the third set with Djokovic down a break. And Djokovic does what Djokovic does so well, which is completely turn it around. Now, it didn't hurt matters that pursuant to the U.S. Open rules, they were able to take a break after the third set. So that really helped Djokovic, and that pretty much explains the bagel, although it doesn't explain why Fucsovics essentially collapsed in the final set. Well, it was so hot. Maybe the break really didn't do him that good or didn't matter that much. But Djokovic was flying after the break, was renewed, and was essentially rehabilitated and ready to go. Probably could have gone many more sets. Well, but the match, the key moment, happened in the third set. And that's when Djokovic did what Djokovic does, which constitutes the paradox. He tastes loss, he decides to win. That's kind of what it is. I won't go on and on about that, but consider that paradox. As I said, put that one in your pipe and smoke it if you're smoking a pipe, or even if you're not smoking a pipe. Roger, incidentally, still in this match with Nishioka. It's not looking good for the Japanese. Nishioka, Federer looks very solid today, folks. And it's just a little too much for Nishioka. But again, we can't read too far into this. Now, it's fun and great to watch Federer play always. But in terms of whether Federer is exhibiting the kind of form that he will need to get through Novak, and if he can get through Novak, he is my favorite to win the tournament. He will likely have to get through Kyrgios, although Kyrgios is not quite done with his business in the first round, and it looks like his opponent, Albert, is up now in the second set. Kyrgios, in a very bizarre, twisty-turny first set, was able to snatch the first 7-5. Well, this one looks like it might just go at least to 4, possibly 5. Now, if Kyrgios is not there in the third round, that eases things up for Federer. But he still has the Djokovic problem. And for those of you, for Djokovic fans out there, again, the fact that Djokovic dropped a set, the fact that he was sort of flagging for a while today, is not a cause for concern. It's a cause for optimism about your man if you're a Djokovic fan. Because he demonstrated once more, as he did so many times in Cincinnati, that when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And Novak Djokovic is tough as a woodpecker's lips. Tough as nails. And he turned it around after tasting the loss. After tasting the loss. That's the paradox. Well, that'll be the match we're all sort of looking forward to. But there are so many other issues. Of course, the heat is just so tremendous at the U.S. Open. It is going to ease off a bit over the next couple of days. So thank you, Lord. The Lord will have mercy. But today and tomorrow are going to be blistering, folks. And this creates upsets sometimes, or these are the kind of circumstances that create upsets. It's like walking through soup out there. Again, there will be relief. There will be relief. Let's turn back briefly to the Nadal match last night. We didn't get to talk about it when I was doing the live stream, of course. It was just starting. Federer, incidentally, if it could just break away, is now up a break in the third set, looking to close this out in straight sets. But back to the Nadal match. This was something of a disappointment. Rafael Nadal against his countryman, David Ferrer. The final score was 6-3, 3-4, because Ferrer, whose left calf was hurting a lot, apparently, and preventing him from moving very well. But interesting thing is he was up a break against Nadal in the second set. Well, Nadal had taken the first set, 6-3. All of us, of course, who know Rafael Nadal and who have watched Rafael Nadal play know very well that David Ferrer's little break in the second set was not such a big deal for Rafa Nadal. Rafa Nadal, it's not quite a paradox like Djokovic. He doesn't need to taste loss. He just needs a little bit. He just needs one break. Djokovic is a tremendous player in terms of breaking back as well, in terms of at will. But Nadal just needs a little bit before you rile up the bull. Well, Djokovic, the hyena, he needs to taste it. He needs to drop a set. He needs his opponent to take him to the edge of the cliff and look down. And then he reaches down deep and he musters the win. He comes flying back. The Serbian storm. He is the hyena. I just love that animal metaphor for Djokovic. But again, he was able to show us once again today, for those Djokovic fans out there, Roger's got this in the bag. So I don't know, we can talk more about Roger's form if you want, guys. But with respect to Djokovic and Djokovic fans, you don't have anything to worry about with respect to him dropping a set. No. Things look very promising for Djokovic based on that opening performance, if you ask me, particularly since things are going to be cooling off. Now, let's turn to Federer for a moment. Obviously, he's doing a very commendable and decisive job against Nishioka. Next, he will face Benoit Paire, and I'm assuming he's going to get through Nishioka. I think that's a safe assumption. I think the smart money is there at this point. Well, Benoit Paire has given Federer some static, has applied some pressure to the great Federer on occasion in the past. I believe, as you recall, he had the match point at Halle that Federer saved well and ultimately won that match, though he did fall to Coric disappointingly at Halle. Well, Federer is 6-0 against Paire. So that could be a more interesting match without question. Albert has taken the second set from Nick Kyrgios. So Nick Kyrgios in the third round for Federer, which will be who Federer faces should he get through the bearded Benoit Paire. We'll have to see. Kyrgios, not a foregone conclusion, folks. Ladies, gentlemen, and forks. Well, the fourth round will be Fognini, possibly, or Chung. I want to talk about Chung a little bit. He had a match as well today, and there were bagels involved. Let's look at this score for Chung. Well, there was actually retirement in the Chung match. It was against Berankis, Ricardas Berankis, the Lithuanian, and this match was competitive in the first set. Chung loses the first set 4-6, but comes back and breaks through in the second in a tiebreaker, winning the tiebreaker 8-6. But then something happened. These things happen, particularly in the heat. The other player just collapses and breaks down, and Chung takes his opponent to the bagel shop, just like Djokovic did in the final set. Well, there were other bagels involved in today's matches. You had Monfils, who took his opponent Facundo Bagnis, an Argentine, to the bagel shop not once, but twice. Well, we'll have to see what Monfils does. That could be interesting as well. But in terms of Federer, if he doesn't have to deal with Kyrgios, fine. That's just fine. It could be then either, well, we'll have to just see. Those matches are pending. So we'll have to see what the third round could be, but it doesn't look like there's too much that's incredibly intimidating coming for Federer. Robert Ferguson, I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. I hope you're enjoying the U.S. Open. Just a few minutes ago, I called you people forks. So thank you for your support, notwithstanding my strange misfiring of words here, but I meant to call you folks, but it came out forks. So, ladies, gentlemen, forks and knives, it's great to have you. It's great to be here on this live stream, and it's great to be watching the U.S. Open. Well, listen, Robert, again, thank you. Thank you for your support, everyone. I really appreciate it all. I love you guys participating in this stuff, and it is fun. Well, today, again, I thought it would be appropriate to go on at 8 o'clock, notwithstanding the fact that the great Roger Federer is playing his first round match in an outfit that is, he's sporting a strange color. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of Federer's outfit, but beyond that, I thought it was fairly appropriate because it's not a particularly special match. Nishioka is really not putting up too much of a fight here against the pressure of Federer. And Federer is looking to kind of prove himself a little bit. He's trying out some new things. Certainly, it's much of what we've come to expect from Federer on good days. A lot of forward momentum in his play. His backhand seems to be firing quite well. A lot of the points are going to Federer based on Nishioka errors. And of course, Nishioka, God bless his soul, must be very nervous playing Federer for the first time, mind you. So Federer, if nothing else, what we can say at this point is that Federer is looking better than he did last year at this point. Because as you recall, he got through Frances Tiafoe last year, but it was a 5-setter in the first round. So Federer was able to plow through, but there was a canary in the coal mine there for Roger Federer. Of course, the red flags in that match turned out to be very predictive. He struggled in last year's U.S. Open, struggled through a match with Uzny, I remember, who retired. He's another one of the flies that dropped today. Well, I shouldn't compare the players to flies, but he's another one that dropped. There's been a combination of injuries and the extreme heat that have produced an enormous number of retirements in the matches today. Better's on a breadstick, says Robert Ferguson. Well, now Federer, for those of you tuning in and not watching the Federer match, is up. Well, I'm seeing 4-0 on the TV. I should get the live scores, however. Yes, it's still 4-0. Federer looks to be now in a position with 2 break points against Nishioka. He looks to be in a position to go up 5-0 and to bagel the poor Japanese in this first round match. Now, listen, if there's a bagel here, bagels don't happen often with Federer. Have you noticed, Fed fans? The bagels are more likely to come forth from a Nadal or a Djokovic. Federer doesn't. And the reason why is this. The reason why is that once Federer gets a break of serve, once he's up a break, and usually it just has to be one, he starts playing differently. It starts to be a bit more experimental for him. He can rely, if he's feeling good about his serve, he can rely on his serve. So he practices. Literally, he does some practicing. I'm up a break, let's do some practicing. Well, what that usually produces is a set win that's based on one break, maybe two breaks. Federer's earliest coaches always commented on this tendency in Federer to always want to try something new. You had to keep Federer interested in new things, the coaches would say. Because if he gets bored, if you do the same exercise over and over, if he gets bored, if he doesn't feel challenged with something new, then he falters, is what the coaches would say. These were the earliest coaches. You need to keep him interested. And so that is part of what explains why, under ordinary circumstances, when Federer gets up a break, is able to break serve, he plays in a different way because he wants to try new things. He wants to play more freely. That keeps his interest. That produces interesting tennis. And his interest needs to be piqued in the game. It's true. Because when he gets bored, man, it's over. It's over. In fact, you could probably explain the Indian Wells loss to Del Potro and the foul mood, sort of out of sorts mood that he evidenced, and I think really, I mean, it was pretty clear, the stubble and whatnot at Indian Wells. He was just all out of sorts, but he was bored. He gets bored sometimes, and when he gets bored, he loses. He needs to be interested. But coming into this tournament is a different set of circumstances. Federer has not broken Nishioka quite yet, so the bagel is not certain yet in the third set. If he bagels Nishioka in the third set, he will join Chung and Djokovic as players who have bageled their opponents in the final set. But this year, I wanted to see some more decisive play. In other words, stop practice or don't get experimental, Federer. Don't rest on your laurels, as it were. Once you've broken serve, charge. And what I'm seeing in the match with Nishioka, which is a positive sign, is that Federer is charging. Okay, now Federer will not take Nishioka to the bagel shop. Nishioka is on the board. Federer is up, I believe, a couple of breaks. But he's charging, and he's not stopping. He's not relenting. That's important. He needs to get into that relentless, unstoppable mode. Just win, win, win. Commitment, total commitment. Going up a break and then experimenting with some shots, I suppose that's fine in the earlier rounds if that's what he has to do to kind of hold his interest in the tournament, basically, to not get bored, because we don't want him getting bored. But we're under a different set of circumstances now. We have the painful loss to Djokovic. We have other quite traumatic losses in the recent past for Federer. We want him to perform. We want him to be unstoppable, to charge, to use the Nadal metaphor, like a bull. Listen, Federer is the cat. A couple of people emailed me and said that Federer shouldn't be a cat because that seems a little too tame. We certainly don't want him to be a pussy cat. No. We don't want Federer to come out on the court and be a pussycat. And I think that what happened with Djokovic, essentially, if we had to boil it down, is that Federer was kind of a pussycat that day. But we don't want him to be a pussycat. We want him to be a ferocious feline animal. So, as a few viewers have said, maybe a cheetah or a tiger is a good metaphor, but he needs to charge and not let up. I want to see bagels. I want him to take folks to the bagel shop. Breadsticks are fine. It looks like it might be a breadstick here. We'll have to see. Although Nishioka's now starting to turn on a little juice here, just past Federer on a fairly good approach from Federer. It's a nice cross-court forehand. Well, excuse me, backhand, yes. So he's still got a little vinegar in him, as it were. Federer cannot let go. He cannot relent. You see, because once you relent, and this happened to Tiafo. I want to talk about Tiafo in a minute. Because Tiafo, as I was saying last night, is one of the American hopes. I want to look at his year. He could be having a breakout year. He is having a breakout year, but we might see him surprise a few people here at the U.S. Open. Now, to save you the suspense, Tiafo has not had great results in the best of 5 context. So it might be unlikely, but he was looking strong. This could be a deeper run for him. He's certainly one of the people that we forgot to talk about last night with respect to the American hopes. Yes, Robert, Taylor Fritz. He came back from 2 sets down. A very good point. Again, showing that capacity. To me, when the players do that, it's promising. When they come down, when they come back from adversity, 2 sets down for Fritz, as Robert astutely pointed out, or 1 set down for Djokovic. They come back, and it's a positive sign. Djokovic fans, the match today against Fucsovics was a good match. He's on track to be in that quarterfinal against Federer. And I'm saying this at a moment when, during that match, there was a point when you really felt, as an observer almost, of course, we know Djokovic better, but there was a point in that match where I felt like this is over for Djokovic. Remember that John Cougar Mellencamp song? When the walls come tumbling down, when the wall come tumbling, crumbling. I thought the Djokovic wall was coming crumbling down. The wall wasn't functioning today. A few bricks were loose. And Fucsovics was exploiting every crack in the Djokovic wall without question, until finally Fucsovics collapsed and had to leave the court with a bagel hanging around his neck. Well, that was a bit humiliating possibly for Fucsovics, although it is Novak Djokovic we're talking about, so he's one of the greatest ever. He came through, and as I've been saying, it was a positive sign that he came through. He's playing just fine. He very much turned the screws, as it were, very much turned the key in the Djokovic engine in the final set and at the critical point there in the 3rd set. So Djokovic looks just fine. It's not going to be a pretty process. If he lifts this trophy, he'll leave a trail of ugliness behind him. He'll leave a trail of odds and ends and ugliness and near misses, sets lost, etc. It's never pretty for Novak Djokovic, but we love him because he comes through. Things tend to be prettier for Federer, and I think it all does come back to this for Federer fans. They're easily disappointed when things don't go smoothly. You know, if his run through a tournament is not as clean as a hound's tooth, then people start to get anxious. Oh dear, he dropped a set. Well, it can be more of a problem in the context of Federer when he drops a set. When Djokovic drops a set, you don't really have to worry now, do you? It's a positive sign in a way. When Nadal gets broken, Lord have mercy on his opponent. But Federer operates a bit differently. We shouldn't be expecting, for Fed fans in the audience, we should not be expecting that Federer's ride will be clean. It's going to be rough. It's a rough and tumble sport. We've got sweltering heat, and he's got a rough draw, a very rough draw into the semifinal anyway. Djokovic knows how to push Rogers' buttons, and Djokovic is, for all intents and purposes, based on what he did today, which was stupefying, to be quite honest. Based on what he did today, he will be waiting on the other side of the court in the quarterfinals should Roger Federer push through. Benoit Paire, possibly Nick Kyrgios, although it could very well be a lesser opponent. Kyrgios is now on serve in the third set against Albert, having won the first set but surrendered one of the sets to Albert. So it's one set all over there, but it might be a lesser competitor than Kyrgios in the third round. Maybe Federer will get a break, but he can't let up, just like he can't let up against Nishioka. Never relent. Never relent. That's what I'm looking for from Federer. I don't want any experimentation. I don't want him to be going out there and trying to keep himself interested. No. And I don't want him going out there and try to look beautiful either. In fact, maybe it's a good thing that this outfit of his is hideous, to be quite honest. It's a hideous color. It's worse than the Darth Federer, folks. I don't know what he's wearing this for. He needs to just get on some white, maybe off-white. Maybe he could work in a few colors with the white, but I don't love this outfit. He needs to stay committed and never relent. Never relent. I want bagels and I want more breadsticks. Unfortunately, he's got a tough draw, so it may not happen. It could. Benoit Paire could be taken to at least the Olive Garden to have a breadstick, right? We'll see what happens, but that's the kind of evidence we should be looking for from Federer. I don't want to see him drop a set. I want to see him slay. With Djokovic, it's going to get scrappy. With Djokovic, it's going to get ugly. They're going to bump ugly. It's not going to be pretty, and Federer should not concentrate on being pretty on the court. He needs to concentrate on one thing and one thing only: the win. On countering the Djokovician wall, finding cracks in the wall. That's what he needs. There are cracks. The cracks are there. The cracks are there. That's another thing that the match today with Vucevic demonstrated. The cracks are there. Well, Matt loves bagels. Matt and I, we've had bagels before. There's no bagels between us. There's no hard feelings, no bad blood, no bagels with cream cheese between us. Federer now up 5-1, has a match point, but he surrenders it. It's on the Nishioka serve, and we're back at deuce. Federer is about to put this thing to bed, folks. Well, there's been no other major upsets today. The one thing that I wanted to talk about in conclusion was Tiafo. Well, I did also talk about Nadal and Federer. I don't think that suggests too much about Rafa. One thing I will say about Rafa is he looks very muscular. He looks very fit. He's been practicing. He's been in the weight room. He looks like his fitness is operating at an extremely high level, as it always is. But he looks very committed as the defending champion. And the fact that Federer had a break on him in the second set is of absolutely no moment. Because we know how Nadal works. It's actually it's not advisable to break Nadal paradox. Now there's the Nadal paradox. The Nadal paradox is you actually can't break Nadal. You have to get him in the breaker, in the tie breaks in a way. Because if you break him, you're going to make the bull so angry. And he'll come back and he'll break back, and that's what he does. Well, Nadal's on to face Pospisil, and those matches are coming up. So in conclusion, let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about Tiafo. And then let's talk about tomorrow's matches and say a few things. I think Federer looks very good right now, folks. But as I've said before, and for those of you wondering, Nishioka is not the stiffest of competition, and we really can't get a good measure, a good handle on what Federer will be able to do with the likes of Nick Kyrgios, possibly. If Nick Kyrgios can get it together against Albert, they're still on serve in the third set. One set all over there in the first round. Yet to see how Federer will operate against the likes of Hyun Chung, who is taking trip. Chung looks pretty good. We'll have to see how he does. He's going to have Kukushkin next, possibly Fognini in the third round, but it's either going to, it'd be in the third round. So it'll either be Chung or Fognini as I'm seeing this draw against Federer in the fourth round, provided Federer can get there and provided he'll get through Kyrgios if Kyrgios is waiting for him. Now, the fact that Kyrgios is dropping a set to Albert, who is a respectable player, mind you, may suggest a few things about Kyrgios's form. I have watched a little bit of that match. I watched the first set a bit, and it was kind of bizarre, twisty-turny a bit. But Kyrgios is hard to predict, folks. He's not very dependable. So it could be that Kyrgios just collapses and is putty in Federer's hands. That could happen too. It's not likely because Kyrgios knows a little something about Federer, doesn't he? Nishioka now on the board with 2 games, so there will be no breadsticks in this match. Looks like Federer couldn't keep his sort of foot on the gas pedal, at least all the way down on the gas pedal, combined with Nishioka kind of getting a second wind here. But what I will say is that Federer has his work cut out for him, but we need to wait until he faces some real competition before we can make any conclusions with respect to his ability possibly to lift his 21st trophy. We're getting some fantastic comments. We've got a nice group of people in here. We're live. Subscribe to the channel. Remember to hit the bell button after you subscribe to the channel because that means you can get notified when Tennis Talk Daily goes live. We're going to be live every day during the U.S. Open. Every night, we're picking this tournament apart from every angle. At this point, it's a big mass of confusion. I know. One of the things I'm trying to do is inject a bit of clarity and simplicity into this. It's hard to do in the opening rounds because it's chaos. It's chaos. There's so many people. Got to think about, you got to keep 128 people in your mind at the same time. Well, that changes as the tournament progresses, which is one of the interesting things about tennis tournaments. I talked about that yesterday. They seem to simultaneously slow down and speed up. They slow down because as the tournament progresses, you get fewer and fewer matches each day, but they speed up because the matches become more consequential and more important, and the stakes get higher. I love the experience of these Grand Slams as an observer, as a commentator, as a lover of this great game. But what I can tell you is this: Federer will have an opportunity soon enough to show whether he's in form, whether he can really do it. Now, tonight is some evidence. He's done it. If anything, tonight he's shown us that he can construct some points. He can play. Oh my gosh, Federer just missed a very easy overhead, and now Nishioka has a break point on the Federer serve. So this is all happening in real time, folks. So let me say that so far it looks like Federer has not been able to kind of keep his foot on the gas. He's relenting a little bit toward the end of this match. And Nishioka, yes, has broken the great Roger Federer. Now, Federer is still up a break and can still close the match out, but it's turning out to be a messier match than it has to be. 10 minutes ago, this guy was going to the bagel shop, folks. Nishioka was going to the bagel shop, but Federer relented. Federer couldn't quite concentrate. He couldn't quite finish it out. Listen, it's not a big deal, but we do have some evidence for you Federer fans that, again, Federer's having a hard time putting a period on the end of this proposition with respect to Nishioka. He needs to put periods on his sets. Exclamation marks even, right? I wanted an exclamation mark after the end of this match, and you know what? He's having a hard time. This is a run-on sentence for you grammarians out there. It's a run-on sentence in the third set for Roger Federer. Listen, it's not as much of a nightmare as for the Federer fans as last year with Tiafo, remember. But that's going to be my last topic. I want to talk a little bit about Tiafo. Tiafo played Mannarino, and this is in connection with our ongoing discussion of who the great American hopes are. We're at the U.S. Open. We know as a historical matter, there was a period in tennis when the Americans just dominated. John McEnroe, who's commentating on a lot of these matches, was part of that domination. Pete Sampras, Jimmy Connors, some of the all-time greats. The Americans are very much responsible for the growth of professional tennis, the growing popularity of professional tennis in the 80s, 70s, and the 80s. And then came the 90s with Sampras. But the popularity kind of went down at that point, at least I remember McEnroe talking about that in the late 90s. Well, we can thank Federer and the big three for bringing back tennis, essentially, for bringing back tennis and its popularity and giving it a new appeal. But what they did is they ended the period of American domination, and they stand for European domination in tennis. Well, it's without being jingoistic about it. I'm not overly nationalistic in this particular respect. Without getting nationalistic, I still think we can have a legitimate discussion about the American hopes at this point in tennis history. We talked about John Isner. It looks like Jack Sock has ended his very disappointing losing streak. But we didn't talk much about Tiafo. Frances Tiafoe, well, he seems to have a certain ease to him, a certain comfort on the court, a certain maturity on the court. He got a couple of time violations. He was kind of strolling out onto the court. He's mellow, he's composed, and he took control of this match from a very early point. Took the first two sets. He was nearly 80% on his second serves. Nishioka has held, and Federer has one more chance to close out this match, having been broken by Nishioka in the last service game. Federer, again, for those of you joining us, having a hard time putting the requisite exclamation mark, or at least a period, on the end of this proposition against Nishioka. But back to Tiafo. He sends Adrian Mannarino packing in 4 sets. At the end of the second set, again, he was nearly 80% on his second serve. He did suffer some setbacks in the match. He dropped the third set. But as you watch the match again, he never gave up. He always kept his eye on the ball. He served well. He was dictating play from the baseline incredibly well. He's not exceptionally nimble at the net, but he does bring an all-court feel. He needs to work on his net play, I should say. But he does bring an all-court style of play. And 20 years old, right now the world number 44. Well, this year has been Tiafoe's big year. He reached 2 finals, one in Delray Beach, which he won. His first and only title he also won on the red dirt at Estoril. Was a finalist, and he fell to Hal Sosa. But he got to the final of Estoril. The impressive thing about the Delray Beach win for Tiafo was that he came through Delpo, Chung, Shapo, and in the final, it was Goyocek. Let me say that again. Delpo, Chung, Shapo, and Goyocek. A very impressive run. Also this year, Tiafo has beaten Burdick. He beat Burdick and Edmund in Miami. And he fell to Anderson in the round of 16 in Miami. He's posting increasingly better results. I got a question from some folks that are watching the match. Let's get back to the Federer match just for a moment. He looks like he's struggling to close this out. Obviously, dropped serve. He seems to be looking able to close this out at this point on serve. But he now has a match point. And Federer looks to, again, be in a position to close this out. He played very well today. Let's see. Is Nishioka going to take him to deuce? At this point, it's kind of likely, in fact, because Federer is sort of flagging. Federer wins straight sets, 6-2, 6-2, 6-4. So let's talk about this a little bit. To close out on Tiafo, I think it is. He looks strong. Let's talk a little bit about Tiafoe's run through this tournament. I think he's going to have to play de Minaur. Assuming that de Minaur got through, and he was really doing a job on his opponent earlier today. He was able to produce the bagel as well. But that could be an interesting match. Tiafo versus de Minaur, who, as I understand it, was able to take out Taro Daniel. Let me confirm that. Yes, de Minaur comes through Taro Daniel very decisively, 6-0, 6-1, 6-2. Well, that means that Tiafo could have a bit of a match on his hands against de Minaur, but then his real reckoning will occur potentially against the great Marin Cilic, the number 7 seed. And so we'll just have to see what Tiafo can do with Cilic if it gets to that point. But it's looking like it will probably be a third round exit. Well, Two things I want to do in conclusion. The one would be, let's talk a little bit about Roger. I mean, I guess that's the long and short of it, folks. We can't make too many conclusions about Roger. He struggled to put a period on this match against Nishioka, without question. On the other hand, he displayed some fantastic tennis. Yes, we're going to get an interview with Federer. I think it was an impressive performance from Roger, but again, closing things out has been a problem. It's part of a pattern, folks. The one that I'm remembering with respect to closing it out is Kevin Anderson at Wimbledon. Now Roger's coming on for an interview. Let's see what he has to say. He's sweating. Sweating like a pig out there. Listen, it is tough going, rough sledding. Calls Nishioka a tough opponent. Well, maybe in the last few games. Fed should grow the beard, Andrew. Well, I think Benoit Paire will be just fine with the beard. I think Roger needs to keep clean shaven. So he's mentioning the heat. The heat is a big factor, folks, without question. It impacts these players. It has been one of the factors that has been producing all these retirements. There were so many retired matches. In a way, the Federer match last night with Nadal just started this trend, and we might see more of it. They're just dropping like flies in this heat. Okay, now they're going to do a little competition. Roger's going to hit a ball out into the crowd. So it's part of a pattern with Federer that he can't quite close out these matches sometimes. Well, the Anderson match was the big example of that. We can say that much. The Anderson match was a big disappointment and is pretty much the most glaring example of Roger Federer totally incapable, unable to finish what he started. Unable to finish what he started. Up 2 sets against Anderson, and he goes on to surrender it all. Well, that happened in kind of the microsphere here in the match against Nishioka. In a sense, I mean, that happened at one level. He just couldn't quite finish it out, but he did end up doing that. It's just that the final score, it was a 6-4. Basically, the last set was based on a single break, which doesn't seem to reflect the extent to which Federer was dominating. Too soon to tell what's really going on with Federer. The only thing we can really tell is that his outfit is objectionable. I'm kind of kidding. He looks fine, but the color of that is just a little too much for me. But let's talk just briefly about the matches we're going to get tomorrow. We're going to see Nadal versus Pospisil, and I will be back on at 8 o'clock for more live streaming, day 3. We've got a lot of great matches coming up. John Isner will be facing Nicholas Jarry. Jack Sock will be in his second round match against Basilashvili. The one that I'm looking forward to will be Shapovalov versus Andreas Seppi. And then, of course, you have Dominic Thiem, who was exhibiting some thought, some very fine form in his first round match. Came through in straight sets. Dominic Thiem will be facing Steve Johnson tomorrow. Now, Steve Johnson looked strong at Winston-Salem. Ultimately, could not quite figure out Medvedev in the final, but was able to send Busta packing. The umpire, we call him the umpire because Busta likes to put his hand on his knee when he's receiving service. He kind of looks like a baseball umpire. I always keep thinking he's going to call a strike or call a ball or whatever. I'm kidding around. But the umpire, Busta, was suffering under the blows of Steve Johnson. Well, we're also going to have one that I mentioned yesterday, Medvedev versus Tsitsipas. That will be a rematch. They played in Miami. They had a little run-in, a bit of a conflict. We've talked about it a few times. Medvedev actually emerged victorious in Miami against Tsitsipas. So this will be a chance for Tsitsipas to redeem. I think Tsitsipas is capable of beating Medvedev. But Medvedev is coming in on a wave of confidence, folks. He won that title. I mean, he wiped Steve Johnson off the court in Winston-Salem. I think Medvedev looks very strong, and Tsitsipas is going to have his work cut out for him. Kevin Anderson will face Jeremy Chardy. Wawrinka will face Humbert, who was a qualifier. We've talked a lot about Wawrinka looking very strong. Del Potro will face Dennis Kudla. Taylor Fritz will face Kubler, the Australian. Milos Raonic will have to do business with Gilles Simon. Karen Khachanov will need to try to get the better of Sonigo. Andy Murray will be playing Fernando Verdasco. Well, there's something of an occasion for Murray. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how Murray looks. Murray could surprise us too. He could have a deeper run. As I've said before, he is finding his rhythm a lot quicker than Wawrinka or Djokovic could under similar circumstances coming back from injuries. But Murray will face Verdasco. Should be an interesting match. Again, looking for more evidence of what Andy Murray can do. Borna Coric will face a very voluminous grunter, Roberto Carballes Baena, the Spaniard. And so those will be some interesting matches lined up. Luckily for the Fed fans and luckily for many of the folks in the bottom half of the draw, they won't be having to play tomorrow, which, as I understand it, is going to be the last day of the real extreme heat. And I'll just, let me just confirm that. I think tomorrow is going to be the last. Then it's going to cool off a little bit. It's still going to be hot, mind you, but it's going to cool off a little bit. So many, many great matches in store at the U.S. Open. We have Federer on display in his first round match and looking to be doing just fine, although he did struggle to put an end, to kind of tie this thing up and put a bow on it, as it were. He struggles to do that sometimes, folks. So as far as I can tell, to the extent we can glean some evidence about Federer, based on this match, it is that he looks committed. It's also that he was buckling a bit under this heat. And also he's still struggling with a demon or two with respect to just finishing out, just closing out matches. And that happened just a little bit there at the end. It was just, he just faltered at the end. And it's the kind of thing that if there had been a player of higher caliber on the other side of the court, if Del Potro would have been on the other side of the court, you have to wonder, would Federer have escaped, or would it have been another match like the Anderson match? Well, that didn't happen to Federer. Again, it's the first match of the tournament. We shouldn't be expecting too much from him. But in terms of high-level play, he will play as good as the player on the other side of the court requires him to play, usually, if he's feeling well. So to the extent that it wasn't the maestro, the full-fledged maestro on the court with Nishioka, that's because Nishioka didn't require the maestro in order for Federer to win, basically. Federer didn't need to do so much, but Federer looks committed. There was a lot of forward momentum in his play, which is a key part of his game. His feet look to be moving well. He's dancing around the court impressively and beautifully. However, he must finish things off. He must put periods on his matches. He must tie these things up, signed, sealed, and delivered. That's what we want from Federer. But he tends to relent. He can relent a little bit, and that's what happened at the end of this match with Nishioka. He was up 2 breaks. He was ready to take the Japanese to the bagel shop. Not that the Japanese Nishioka would have enjoyed bagels anyway. It's New York. They all love bagels, right? Whatever. Nobody likes a bagel at the US Open in this sense, but you get what I'm saying. He was so close, folks, to a bagel or a breadstick, but then it just slipped and slipped and slipped. And before you know it, he was able to win the final set, but based on a single break alone. And after Nishioka had broken Federer's serve. So now Federer's got to deal with that feeling of having been broken by this pretty much no-name Japanese player. Nishioka's been around a while, and he's no slouch. I was talking earlier in the week about how these tournaments are fixed to give the top 2 players the easiest competition in the first round in any case, and that's true. So there was some select committee that actually put Federer with Nishioka because they want Federer to get through and to actually play more than one match in this tournament so they can make some money. Roger Federer is a big draw. But Roger could not quite finish off Nishioka in the way that I kind of felt like he should have. Was not that much competition on the other side of the court from Federer tonight, to be honest. Now, Nishioka did bring out that second wind. I was sitting here watching it as I was talking with you. He did bring out a second wind, but at the same time, Federer buckled a bit, just as he did with Anderson. Now, Federer escaped this time, but that is precisely the dimension of his play that he must work on. He must work on the clutch tennis. He must work on, first of all, finishing his match propositions with a period and not screwing around at the end. He faltered. We want strong finishes, strong starts, strong finishes. What we got today from Federer was a strong start and a shaky finish. That's what we got from him. Strong starts and shaky finishes lead to the Kevin Anderson match at Wimbledon. That's right. If you let up just a little bit, they'll come attacking. If you give them 1 inch, they'll take all 9 yards, or at least they'll reach for it. You can never surrender. You can never let down your guard. That's what Tiafo did. He left down his guard. Robert, yes, they love bagels in New York. Oh, yes, they do. Well, like I said, though, the bagel in tennis is a little problematic, but the bagels do have a certain resonance here in New York. So in a way, maybe it's good that the bagels are coming. But like I said, the bagels are getting produced by the heat, which I guess is appropriate for the metaphor, right? You need heat to bake the bagels. The extreme heat is creating great oven conditions for bagels. Lots of bagels. Just go ask Gail Monfils. Back to Federer for a moment, though. Listen, folks. He started strong. and finished just a bit weak. Is it a problem? Is it a canary in the coal mine? Is it a red flag for Federer? I don't think it is. I think it's just astoundingly hot in New York right now. As a sidebar, it does look like Nick Kyrgios is going to push through Albert. He dropped a set, the second set, and he is now up a break in the fourth set, so is on track to take that match, his first round match. He will go on to face, I think the opponent is still yet to be determined. Is it Pierre-Hugues Herbert? Or did Bambry come through? Let me know. But in any case, the big news about Kyrgios would be a Federer match in the third round. That's the big challenge potentially for Federer. Listen, folks, here's my 2 cents on Federer. Here's the nugget on Federer. First of all, as I said before in my previous videos, that Federer needs, that Fed fans need to relax and that Federer needs to relax. Well, as always, well, not always, but as happens a lot, I was misconstrued. I don't mean to say that Federer needs to relax and just kind of take it easy and be casual. No, I was talking about just kind of this stress, like this tension he's bringing out on the court that's baggage. He needs to get rid of that. He needs to be focused and committed. He doesn't need to relax in terms of relaxing the pressure that he's applying to his opponent. No, I meant relax in a different sense. He needs to have fun. Maybe that's basically what I meant. He needs to have fun and find the fun in the competition. Because at a certain level, if you aren't having fun doing it, you know, you're not going to play well. So he needs to have fun. But listen, here's the point about Federer based on the match today. He has shown us a pattern, folks. And for Fed fans, it's very hard to take. It hurts for Fed fans, and it hurts for Federer. The pattern is this. He can't finish what he started, and he can't perform at the important moments when it matters. He's been struggling to find the clutch tennis player within. And he's been just the near misses, the frustratingly near misses that he has given us this year have been so hard to deal with. I understand. I empathize with you, Fed fans. I empathize with you wholeheartedly. It's been so hard, and it's been hard for Federer as well. Today, I have to say, I have to look at the facts and look at the evidence as it's presented to me. I can't spin this. And I'm not going to try to be over optimistic with respect to Federer. If I have to give you the sort of brass tacks on today's match, it's that he looks very strong, he looks committed, he looks fresh, and he looks like he's moving well. However, he struggled to put the period on the proposition against Nishioka. And I've used that metaphor a couple of times tonight because I think it's the proper metaphor. He needs to close out these matches, folks, and he relented a little bit at the end of the match. And like I said before, if a player, the likes of Del Potro, for example, or a Wawrinka, heaven forbid, a Rafael Nadal, certainly a Novak Djokovic, possibly a Nick Kyrgios, if one of these lads was on the other side of the court at the end of this match with Nishioka rather than Nishioka, and Federer started to falter a little bit, just failed to protect his line, failed to hold his line just a little bit, He gave Nishioka just a centimeter, and the Japanese started taking more. Before you knew it, Nishioka had broken Federer, I think, a couple of times as it happened. Well, Federer did escape, but there's two parts to this equation with Federer. So in terms of giving us evidence that he's capable of playing clutch tennis at the U.S. Open in 2018, Federer did not give us much evidence that he can play clutch tennis. He did close out the third set. He did come through in straight sets, but he gave us virtually no evidence that he's capable and will be playing clutch tennis at the U.S. Open. Not that we should have evidence in the first round at all, but for those of you just coming on, if you're interested, that's my best reading. That's about the most insight I can offer you about this Federer match, and it's really probably to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt because we can't make too many judgments about his form at this point. Things change over the course of the tournament, but what we can say, and I'll close with this, it's going to be an optimistic note for Fed fans. The point is that compared to last year, Fed's looking quite good. Of course, he had Tiafo on the other side of the court. Last year in the first round, it went 5 sets. That was a doozy. That was a tough match in the first round, and he struggled going forward as well. And I think there was only one straight set, or maybe 1 or 2 straight set wins before the quarterfinal loss to Del Potro. Federer was struggling. Well, a clean straight set victory over Nishioka is better than the result from last year. But I will say that he failed to show us that he's capable of playing the clutch tennis. Not that there was many opportunities to do so anyway, but when Nishioka started applying pressure in the final set, things got a little rough. There was a bit of rough sledding in what was otherwise a clean match. And I'm sorry to say so, folks, but it was a bit reminiscent of the Kevin Anderson match in a way, on a much smaller scale. So I suppose in the end that we have some evidence that Federer is about in the same form as we've been witnessing him, which means that he will probably be in the quarterfinals, which means that he will probably push through Kyrgios, who seems to be now pulling ahead and will be in the second round. And it looks very likely that Federer will be in the quarterfinal until I get more evidence that Federer is going to make some adjustments, that Federer maybe has, another gear that he's identified and is prepared and able to shift into when it matters. Potentially, the heat was giving him some problems today, although, again, that's not an excuse. When he gives me some evidence, maybe I'll change my prediction. But the prediction now, as it stands, is that Federer will have a quarterfinal run at the U.S. Open. Djokovic, for those of you tuning in, dropped a set today and looked to be sort of flagging in his match with Vucevic, but ultimately executed a reversal that confirmed the Hyena's ability to dig down deep and, having tasted loss, this is the Djokovic paradox. He must taste loss before he can win, and he does it all in one match. The difference between him and Federer, I've said before that Federer has to lose in order to win. Well, Federer loses matches. He doesn't often taste loss in the match. When he's tasted loss in a match, he usually loses the match. There are some exceptions to that, but what I will say in conclusion is that Federer looked absolutely beautiful, and it's going to be a pleasure to watch him. So, with respect to my previous proposition that Fed fans should relax, Fed fans should relax. And I am something of a Fed fan. We should relax and we should just enjoy Rogers' fantastic play. He was out there like a prowling cat, a cheetah in the first couple of sets. He relented a bit. The heat got to him. He was sweating like a pig. And in a first match showdown like that, maybe it kind of got to him in the end. Meanwhile, Nishioka did up his game and raised his level. So there's very little that we can conclude definitively about this match. It was a pleasure to watch him. I said I was joking that I thought his outfit, the color of his outfit, was quite hideous. I have a shirt that is exactly the same color. I think I've worn it on a few of my episodes, but I was joking around. He looks fine. Not that he should be caring what he looks like. He should not worry about his appearance at all, and needs to be dedicated to winning and winning alone, even if it has to be ugly. That's what Federer lacks in a way. He brings with him all the expectations of his fans that he is the most beautiful player in history. And my thesis is that this can impact his play negatively. It can cramp his style because subliminally he feels the need to keep it pretty. He wants to keep it pretty, both in the scores and also in how he appears on the court. And by contrast, Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal, and certainly Andy Murray, we were joking around about Andy Murray the other day with his bedhead, but certainly those players, they just don't care about the beauty aspect. And they aren't as beautiful players, but they can pull out the wins. Well, Federer needs to, if he has to do this ugly, if he has to bump ugly with Djokovic and Kyrgios, it could get rough. So he needs to be prepared for rough sledding. He needs to be prepared for rough sledding. I think he's preparing himself. I'm so very much looking forward to sharing all of this with you. We'll have some great matches for tomorrow. I'll be back on tomorrow night. And that's about it. Unless there are some other comments, I'm probably going to close it out. Some viewers are coming on after the fact. They don't get to catch the live streams, and the live streams are running kind of long, and they get a little intimidated when they see a video that's 2 hours and 2.5 hours long. And I'm getting some comments, some very respectful comments from people that really want to watch the show, but they feel like, wow, how do I dive into 3 hours? Where do I start? It's too much. They don't have time. So I understand that. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to try to do two things to kind of respond to that. The first is I'm going to keep the episodes shorter. In other words, the live stream should probably be an hour, and I want to be pretty disciplined about that. Again, for people coming back, they come back and watch the videos, and they, if they see an hour, maybe they'll be less intimidated. They can jump in and they can listen to a substantial part of it. The other thing I'll do is I'll try to summarize stuff at the front end a little more so that folks can come on at the beginning and then maybe do their thing later. But otherwise, for those of you who are on, you can also feel free to kind of, if you see a video that's the live stream, just click in at any time. We're always going to be talking about relevant stuff. In the U.S. Open, we're going day by day, so we're always going to be talking about stuff that's relevant to the day in question. This is day 2. So we're going to continue this discussion. I appreciate all of your support, all of your time, and we're going to be back tomorrow. Have a great night. See you later. Bye.